So, good morning, everyone. Normally, when we have committee meetings, we have a 15-minute rule. We don't today, but we did get it under 9 minutes. I apologize. This is our first meeting of the working group. I assume everyone can hear. If you're not hearing, raise your hand or signal in some manner, shape, or form. Um, I'm here with the working group for Mystic. I'm here with my co-chair of commerce, Senator Hartley, and online I see we have Representative Anaskovich and Senator Martin, who are the ranking on commerce. Just by way of background, last session in the biennium, we had a working group on Mystic. The group I've formed this time is, I'm hoping, is more, well, I know it's more of the agency group, and it's more to really look at the challenges facing Mystic. And I want to set out what I think are the goals or framework and what takes me here. I've gone up to Mystic a number of times. I've been with the first selectman, Mystic, with John Burt, the town manager of Groton, the city of Groton. And they've all been gracious to me. I've worked with Deep, and I believe I was up there with Brian Hurlburt for a tour, along with somebody from OPM, to look at the breakwater. And that's just by way of background. What's clear to me when I look at Mystic is there's a whole host of opportunities, and there's a whole host of challenges in managing Mystic, or the greater Mystic area, Stonington and Groton. And I particularly wanted to give the session today to a view on with John and with Bill, the two elected representatives, local ones, to talk about the issues. Frankly, if you go back to 30,000 feet, all economic activity in the state is captured basically with two principal sources of revenue. It's the income tax, and the capital gains and the volatility tax, and it's sales tax and economic activity. All of those funds end up back in Hartford, which leads our municipalities in the larger scope of the sense in managing through a mill rate, which, if you think, is both can be regressive or difficult, and it's also it's a lengthy process in property appreciation, and there are limits to what the towns can afford. So what I'm trying to get here is the focus on the opportunity space here in growing the economic activity revenue, which ultimately ends up in Hartford, but probably will require us to look at the level and nature of the investment we're willing to make in infrastructure, and to solve some of the traffic issues, these resiliency issues, et cetera, to make the experience better in those areas. So what I'm looking here is to work on a priority list first from those two principles in this meeting. I'd like to set up sometime close to the end of August, maybe early September, depending on schedules permitting, that we maybe engage with both with John and with Bill to work on a tour up there to get a physical sense of the needs and really walk through the area. You know, apart from those two municipal players, as it were, I expect obviously some of the bigger attractions, but being both the aquarium and the seaport, weigh in. But I'm looking at those as being intrinsic requests related to their operations versus the overarching. So I'm not dismissive of those. I'm inclusive of both the seaport and the aquarium. But I just wanted to get us a sense of where I'm hoping to take the group. And with that, I'll turn over to comments to my co-chair, Senator Hartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's a pleasure to be here in this off session where, quite frankly, a lot of good work gets done and tees us up for the start of the legislative session. And I first of all want to recognize the incredible work that my co-chair on Commerce has taken on this particular issue. When it first came to us with regard to the pain points, quite frankly, that this part of the state was experiencing in reference to their economic development, and in particularly as a recognized destination, not just in Connecticut, quite frankly, but New England and beyond. And so Representative Meskers has been working on this, as he indicated, for a number of sessions, and he, actually being from the complete opposite side of the state, has really embraced this and been a leader. So I'm very pleased to be able to be involved and be supportive of this. This is a very important part of the state of Connecticut's economy, and it also connects very directly with what we're going to additionally be working on this interim, and that is on the tourism sector for the state of Connecticut. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hartley. Any comments? Senator Martin, would you like to say anything? I see you there. You're still muted. As you're still muted, Senator Martin. Okay, I'll come back to you. Representative Maniscovich, anything you wanted to comment? I think you're muted as well.
Okay, I am muted.
Perfect.
Great. All right. Yeah, thanks everybody for convening here. I know that Steve, you've been doing a lot of work regarding the southern part of the state and trying to focus on what needs to be done in the southern quarter, the Route 95, and then when we heard from Senator Summers regarding, hey, Mystic needs attention a couple of years back regarding we've got an opportunity here to organize on a larger scale tourism and increase tourism in that area if we did certain things such as the parking issue. I know that's a big concern for the Mystic area, and then if we can address the in and out of that area more efficiently, we would help the state economy. So I'm glad we're doing this collectively and getting all the stakeholders involved and deciding what needs to be done in the area. So thanks to Steve and to Heather for leading the charge, so to speak.
Thank you, Senator Martin. Representative Maniscovich, any comments? Was that no?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So to frame it all out, the issues that I want to bring out are from John and from Bill. To bring it forward, what I'm envisioning is that we work on a targeted list of objectives being related to traffic, related to parking, related to infrastructure, and begin to see what's achievable in the short term and what are the longer term goals. Moving the needle is going to take some effort and some time, but I'm hoping we can work, and that's why I brought in our partners at DECD, at OPM, and the various other Connecticut agencies, the Department of Agriculture, the DOT. It's because I want to get people who have planning experience to give us an idea, sit back and understanding the problem, come back to us with an idea of what they think the scope is, so we can begin to figure out which pieces we can chew on and achieve in the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. I don't anticipate that there's a magic bullet absent $20 or $30 billion solution, which I don't see happening tomorrow. So small bites in small pieces and with long-term objectives so that we can keep an idea of a vision and create a successful plan. And with that, I think I'll turn it over now to the first selectman of Stonington, Bill Middleton. Bill?
Thank you very much, and thank you to our co-chairs for all of their work on this, especially Representative Meskers, who has been our greatest advocate in many ways. So, having some boots on the ground for the last 6 months and having worked with town manager Bert, obviously traffic and parking, as we pointed out, are the major issues. So, in the short run, just to sort of give an update, been working on achievable issues. One of the things I've been focusing on very recently is finding employee parking. So if you can park the employees, then that will free up on-street parking for visitors. So we have a municipal lot in town, a voting hall that I was just out last week, looked at with the town engineer and the DPW, and we can get 32 spaces in there, a few minute walk from a lot of businesses. So I think that, smaller things like that will take a lot of the pressure off. Also identifying other businesses that, law practices, dental practices, whose lots are unused in the evenings and weekends, and trying to work out with them the ability for employees of hospitality to use those as well. So I think that's a very kind of quick and easy, low-hanging fruit way of addressing at least a little bit of the parking. John Burt and I have met with our respective planning staffs about the idea of paid parking in Mystic, which I think is inevitable and to some extent people expect in a visitor town. And I think we agree on that it all has to be implemented simultaneously, including the Seaport and the Mystic Museum of Art lot, ideally with the same software, the same system. And a lot of the parking issue is not so much capacity necessarily, because I always say there's not necessarily a parking problem. There's a problem parking where you want to, when you want to, for free. And those are different problems, right? So we do have capacity. It's just the management of that capacity, whether it's municipal, private lots, getting people used to the idea of walking a few steps and not being able, parking directly in front of where you want, when you want. So, I think that's sort of a more interim solution, and longer term, looking at ultimately creating more parking capacity. To go to the 30,000 foot level, my overall vision is we need to figure out how do we get people to Mystic not in a car. And to the extent that they do, and that's a different, a variety of different solutions. Potentially flights into Groton is one way. The bus lines that drive by every day on their way from Boston or Providence to New York, it's okay for them to stop in Mystic too. These are all pretty, easily achievable objectives, I think. And then to the extent that people do arrive by car, how do we get them out of their car as quickly as possible and move them around in a way that has minimal impact on residents? And we're lucky we have some inherent infrastructure there. Route 27 as it is pretty maxed out, but we have the opportunity at exit 90 potentially for some parking and get people out of their cars there into a water taxi, ideally an autonomous water taxi, in that a regular water taxi requires somebody with a 100-ton captain's license, and those are expensive people, and we need lots of them. So that really speaks to the ongoing operating cost. And I realize this probably sounds a little fantastical out of the blue, but you warm up to it eventually. And then also we have the Mystic River Park that has a river walk there. And at Seaport Marine, they're working on a plan to extend that river walk down and ultimately almost to the train station. And I would like to extend that to the north up to exit 90. So we now have options to get people out of their car at exit 90, move them into town via a water taxi. They can walk via the river walk. They can bike on the river walk. Improve the sidewalks on Route 27 into town, which I've already been working on, in simple things, just like even pruning the trees to make it more visually appealing. signage that, says 15-minute walk to the Mystic Drawbridge from here, that awareness. And then, potentially a shuttle trolley into town too, with the issue with that being that those shuttles and trolleys are in the same traffic as everyone else, right? There's not a lot of traffic on the river, so that helps. In terms of Route 27 itself and traffic flow, we have in front of Oster right now a redesigned traffic plan for the Delamar Boathouse area. We expect to get that done pretty quickly. That'll be a short-term solution, I think, that will ease that. In the longer run, we have a federal grant in to underground the power lines on Route 27. That will, no pun intended, pave the way for a re-engineering of Route 27, which is somewhat long overdue, and improve both the traffic and the pedestrian flow along Route 27. That's all I got.
There sounds like a lot to chew on there. It would be helpful if you've got any of the studies or any of the research on this, if you would refer it back to the clerk so we could circulate some of the information to the working group.
Will do.
So everyone can, I'd like people to begin to familiarize themselves both with some of these proposals, with the layout of the area, so that if we get to, at the end of August, beginning of September, a walking tour and a conversation, we can physically see what the plans are, figure out which of them are actionable over time, which of them make sense. And I'm hoping that, within this group, we have people who bring to bear their experience on that. I would add in here, Bill, the only thing that you didn't mention, and it's outside the scope maybe of the tourism, but I believe last year Joe Courtney helped, or 2 years ago, helped secure about $500,000 for the fishing pier, the commercial fishing pier. I think the state, we also helped. I pushed on securing, with the help of the local elected officials, another $500 for the fishing pier. But I've spoken with all of our reps and the Senator Summers, about the breakwater. And there we've got an issue of an 1880 breakwater that is now, and I want to bring this to the attention of the group, we've got a breakwater that is now topped over at high tide. And the breakwater, I'll defer to an expert, but it should be 3, 4, or 5 feet north of high tide, in that it serves to break the kinetic energy of the waves that are washing into the harbor and threatening the commercial pier and the commercial restaurants and operations in there. So that's something which I think is a short or term or specific issue, and that leads to, on the commercial side, our commercial fishing fleet, the safety of the harbor, probably the insurance liabilities of the commercial operations inside that harbor. So I want to make sure we add that to the list from my point of view, in terms of, because I believe that's within your scope.
It is,
It's
yeah.
in Stonington. And with that, let me go on now to John, if you're ready to speak up, John.
Sure, thank you. I wanted to first reiterate what First Selectman Middleton's comments about thanking everyone for their time. It's really appreciated by everyone locally. I'm glad you mentioned a little bit about climate change. I just want to keep it on the radar we're already seeing huge impacts from climate change where, for instance, Lux and Bond coming into where the old bookstore is, they were faced with renovations. They either have to elevate their building or else they have to anchor it into the bedrock, which is a couple $1 million. They're looking at anchoring it. This is becoming more and more of an issue. Just the other day, we saw Fort Rachel flood for the first time. People locally there said first time ever that they've seen that area flooded. So it's there's going to need to be money available in the future for that. Now the town is doing quite a bit towards resilience. I won't go into that now, but just to keep it in everybody's mind. One other thing to mention, I think everyone's generally familiar with what's going on with congestion, but I just want to keep also in people's minds, the side streets, the residential areas. It's very tight through there. I get most of my complaints from the residents that you can't get emergency vehicles through what's supposed to be two-way traffic is really more like one way. You have to pull off where you can in people's driveways, allow others pass. So, a comprehensive solution is going to end up being needed for some of this. I've got to look at the whole picture. In terms of and a little bit what we're doing for congestion, we added some parking software. I think it was October of 24, T2 parking, where we can ticket on site. We've really ramped up our ticketing to try to get the changeover, people not stay in one spot all day. Prior to that software, we had only had ticket revenue of about 3,500. Last year, it was about over 38,000. So it's really helping. We're seeing more turnover from that. We have some community service officers in the summer helping out to ticket, keep an eye on things. We put foot patrols for police down whenever we can, but what we're seeing in Mystic is a lot of other things going on at the same time, ramp up of vandalism, fights, that type of thing, and it's redirecting our officers to other things than the parking. And, the more successful Mystic is, the more that's going to be an issue. In terms of kind of a long-term look at things, I believe parking meters, paid parking has to be part of any solution. And then ideally some parking locations shortly outside of the downtown connected by something like a trolley along with an app that tells you where the available parking spots are to cut down on some of this roaming we save looking for spots. And eventually also even getting some traffic, Stonington gets a lot more traffic than like the Allen Street exit does on our side, partly because we don't have signage up there, but you also have on Stonington side, of course, the Seaport and the Old Mystic Village. Ideally, you would separate some of the entrances to both sides to diversify where the traffic is. Now, Allen Street is an extremely wide road. The DOT is looking at reconfiguring, adding roundabouts at the highway exit. As that happens over the next few years, I'd like to look at what can be done for any parking along Allen Street. I know there'll be some resident opposition, but I think there won't be a comprehensive solution without a little bit of friction going along in it.
We appear on the utility bills for two accounts.
In terms of more short term, getting parking meters in, talking to my planning department, roughly 500,000 needed to get that going. Hopefully that'll disincentivize the employee parking and get them a little further out and just keep the turnover going. We'd like to do a study eventually on side streets to see where, if any place does one ways make sense, similar to the one way that was created over on the Stonington side. We'd like to take a closer deep dive into that. Maybe funding for reconfiguration of the parking lot of Mystic Art Museum and maybe a couple of the churches to get some more spots there for the public, while we're trying to figure out longer term, larger solutions, just get some more spots in place. And then our website we have a map and locations of all the parking in Mystic. I don't know if the tourism state site has that type of thing, but it'd be good to have that there. I think we need better physical signage for where parking is located at in Mystic to cut down on the roaming. And then like to also continue to revisit the sales tax at restaurants to come back locally to help pay for, paid parking, help pay for things, but with the police and these other things, it's going to take quite a bit of money. So I'd like to see some taxes come back locally. That's kind of where I see things going.
Thank you very much, John. What I would say is I think the biggest piece of the pie, or the most difficult piece to chew on is, and is a political question, which I'm not sure we're either prepared to deal with or whether I would look to champion in the short term, which is the wrestling on the economic activity taxes, right? Last session, we looked at the 1% surcharge on restaurant meals, which is now, I would think, over time, been thoroughly incorporated into the general budget. I think, absent a way to carve out some of that money for use in the local level, the next question becomes a policy issue of allowing 169 municipalities or designated municipalities to have an economic activity tax to support their efforts. Or conversely, looking at the economic activity taxes in Hartford and looking how we can dedicate a portion of that incremental revenue to go back for economic activity. But those two issues are fraught with questions and political challenges. I think the shorter term answer, which may put me a challenge with the administration, will be the question of some of the economic activity revenue then being dedicated and reinvested back locally in the infrastructure. That may be the more achievable in the short term. The other one is a big structural question of the risk, John, to be frank, when I look at economic activity tax, the risk with 169 municipalities, if I entrust or reduce or split the sales tax explicitly, revenue tax, does it go to incrementally improve the infrastructure? Does it go to substitute a mill rate? Does it go for other activities? And I realize that I may hear objections from, I would expect both from you and from Bill, on the judgment from Hartford of where that money goes versus the judgment locally where it goes. But I'm not sure where we are on that. But certainly, I think we will consider and look at it. It'll probably be a footnote at this point because I think it might stop a lot of other decisions in their tracks. I think the definition of what we need to do becomes the first, and then how we pay for it becomes the second, right? Because both of them, I think the first one is as challenging, which is why, if you can see that the group that we brought on board here today, it's a host of members of the executive branch of the government. And I'm trying with a light touch to encourage them to look at the challenges to give us a scope and an idea of what both you as local administrators and us as the legislative branch can hope and expect for, and whether things can be moved forward, and what things are short-term achievable, and what may require incremental funding for the rollout planning to try to get boots on the ground on certain of the projects. That's kind of where I'm thinking, John, on that. I think certainly what we've seen, I would appreciate, John and Bill, forwarding to our clerks any of the information you have to date, and any of the proposals, particularly, I guess one of the things I'd love with DOT, I'm hearing a generalized scoping conversation about existing parking. I don't know whether there's been engagement and whether the DOT could advise on, or whether it's just a private sector solution on who does that type of scope of parking availability among 20 or 30 different private nonprofits and private for-profit entities. So maybe, I don't know, Bill, maybe you can comment on what have you seen anything on that yet?
I haven't seen any studies. I know we had a town planner a while back that had done an inventory of all lots, public and private, essentially on the Stonington side of Mystic. So I've kind of started to go down that road, identify those private lots that we might be able to use, and try to figure out an incentive system. One of the things I've just started to look at is, can we give them a property tax abatement on the parking portion of their property to incentivize them to engage in using those lots.
Okay. How about you, John? I would appreciate as well, John, as you mentioned, that you seem to have a comprehensive survey of parking, both private and public parking. It'd be great if you could send that out to us. But
Sure.
any comments or any thoughts on the management? Are you aware of any of the firms that would do that, or the software apps that handle that type of parking?
There was some work done a couple of years back on some of this. I can look back to see what materials we have.
Okay, if you could send us references, because the problem is not unique to Mystic, so I wouldn't have any objection to leaning in on our Department of Transportation, because if it's a solution that has applications to other tourist destinations or areas of the state that have, intermittent economic activity, concerts, et cetera, I think this is an interesting way to manage some of the parking issues. So whatever you've got, I think that's not an unfair issue to ask the DOT where they go, what they would recommend in terms of like, and we can also, I think also we would probably charge the Office of Legislative Research to see what the issues are in relation to public and private parking shares and information sources, if they've got anything from the Office of Legislative Research on that. I think we probably chewed on a fair amount already today. I'm not sure there's much more for us to do. I will open up to the group for comments in a second. The next piece of the agenda for us is I'm going to go through the clerk and go out and submit. I'm going to ask John and Bill, give me 2 or 3 alternatives, August, September, that work for both of you for view. And then I'm going to make a dictatorial assessment of how many looks like they can attend and make a decision. I know it's vacation time. I know August and July, or August and September, people have things to do. But I'm going to see how I can get the maximum group of people, of interested parties up to get a walkthrough to look at what, boots on the ground, what we think we need. And with particular emphasis on the agencies of the executive branch, DOT, DECD, OPM, just so I get people who've seen projects around the state and can lend some of that thought and expertise on advice on how to proceed. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Are there any comments from the members on Zoom or here in the office? Anyone like to speak at this point?
Yes, this is Senator Summers. I have had
Good.
my hand up. I just
Go ahead.
wanted to say a couple things quickly. As the former mayor of Groton over 10 years ago, this conversation we're having is like Groundhog Day. We have been having this conversation in Mystic for at least 15 to 20 years on the parking issue. I think we know what we need to do, but it needs to have buy-in and investment from the state to be able to get it across the finish line, because it's too large for the municipalities to be able to manage on their own. And quite frankly, it's not fair for them to have to manage it, seeing as all the revenue goes to the state. I wanted to mention that last week I had the commissioner of DECD down here. We did see the breakwater. There's 2 breakwaters. It's not just one. They are at a stage right now that are, I would say they're critical in need. Not only do they protect the 2 piers that we're investing in, but the harbor, and Stonington Harbor is probably one of the best harbors in Connecticut, not because I represent Stonington, just because it's easy access and you're out and you're right in, Long Island Sound, you're in the ocean. You're not traveling way up to get into a river, or I'm sorry, into a harbor. It's right there. You're right at the mouth. So it is something that is highly sought after. There's restaurants, there's things. So we really need to protect it, because you're not just protecting, Stonington Village, you're protecting, the homes, the greater part of Mystic. We went through this with Enders Island years ago for a breakwater there that protects Mason's Island. So that is something that is a significant investment. So I did bring DECD down there. They did see it. They also saw the pier. And some other areas in Groton that could look at investment. So I don't think we need to recreate the wheel on what needs to be done, because we've been having the same conversation for the last 15 to 20 years. What we do need to do is get the 2 towns on board, which sounds like they are, as far as, paid parking, where we can offset parking, et cetera. And really, I think the push has to be an investment in our tourism anchor for the state of Connecticut through the state. There are opportunities for parking. I did talk to the DECD commissioner quite in detail about parking structures. One of the things that they talked about is we might be looking at autonomous vehicles in the near future. How do you build a structure that can accommodate the changing needs for the way that we move people around? The water taxi is something that we have been talking about for ages also. So I just don't want us to spin our wheels. I know there's been parking study after parking study done in Groton and Stonington. I think we could collect that, but I think we need to take action rather than like reiterating everything we already know and we have been doing for the last 15 to 20 years. I would suggest September would probably be a better time for people to come down and visit than August. There's so much going on in Mystic in August. We did get additional money for Shoreline East. One of the things that we have been advocating in the Tourism Caucus, so everyone's on board, is additional train service from Memorial Day to Labor Day so that people can come by train, get off and walk anywhere they want in Mystic, but we need time to ramp up to be able to advertise that. So those are just a few things I just wanted to touch base on. And, I'm happy to be part of this group, honored to represent the district. And I'm excited to try to actually push the needle and get something done. So just wanted to make sure I said that.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that, Senator Summers. Any other comments from the group? Hearing none. Clerk, what else did I have on the agenda? Read it to me. You should have been prepared, Clerk. According to my esteemed colleague here, it's the setting of the next meeting. I'm going to hold in abeyance the next scheduled meeting, which will, if we cannot agree in the month of August, for a physical visit, and I heard Senator Summers suggesting September. I kind of like August because I think the inference was the traffic is a nightmare, and I can't think of a better time to basically show up, but to see it at its worst, embarking. So I'm kind of going to push for an August date. I'm going to defer to John and Bill to concur or to find dates and come out to the group to see how many people can be there. And I'd like to try to get that done in August. Absent that, you will hear back from us with a scheduled Zoom somewhere near the end of August if we can't get to a physical meeting. So I think that basically concludes our first meeting. I want to thank all of you for showing up. Particularly, this is high season for John and for Bill. This is low season for us in politics, except for those who are running around for issues related to November, but with those I won't broach here. This is important work. I think Senator Summers framed it slightly differently, but it was what I said at the open. The economic activity is coming, the revenue is coming into the state. We have to figure out in which way we can reinvest in that economic activity in these two beautiful, wonderful parts of our state, into Groton and Stonington, as I refer to the Mystic, greater Mystic area. I think the model I'm looking for here, and I want us to think about that, will have implications, hopefully, outside the area once we get it right. So I'd like to try to get it right in this area, and this is the crown jewel as far as I'm concerned. We get it right here, and quote unquote, this is a show we can take on the road for other parts of the state 2 years from now or 3 years from now, once we've reached an agreement on what we do and how we do it. So thank you, everybody. I think that concludes our meeting for today.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Folks. Good seeing folks.